Montana Territory, late September, 1876. The wind was high and sharp along the edge of the Red Elk Range, sending dust from the dry earth skimming past the weathered barn walls on the Turner Ranch. Seth Turner swung down from his gelding, boots landing heavy with trail dust, and paused when he heard a sound. Not a cry, not even a full breath. Just a whisper like someone trying not to be found. He stepped around the corner of the barn, hand resting easy on the grip of his colt, and froze. A young woman crouched in the space between the barn and the stacked hay barrels, her dress torn at the hem, shawl clutched tight against her chest. Her hair, dark and wild, was pinned back with a single copper clip. Her eyes met his, wide with something that looked more like hope than fear. "I'm not running," she whispered, voice dry and steady. "I'm waiting for you." Seth blinked. "What?" She stood slowly, dust falling from her skirt. "I thought you might be the one to find me. I prayed it would be you." Seth stared at her, heart thudding in a rhythm he did not understand. "You know me. I remember you, from the fair in Miles City. 5 years ago, you gave a coin to a boy who stole your hat, and you laughed when your cousin yelled at him. You looked happy." Seth tried to piece her face into memory, but she did not wait. "My name's Keira Rylan." "I need help." He eased his coat back, letting her see the badge clipped to his belt. "Seth Turner, foreman here, and part-time deputy. You in trouble?" Keira glanced toward the hills beyond the property. "My brother-in-law, after my sister died, he said he'd take care of me and the boys. But he sold off the land, spent the money, and when I said I was leaving, he said I was stealing his sons." Seth's eyes narrowed. "Your children?" "My nephews. Jackson's 11. Jude's 7. They're my sisters, and she made me promise before she passed that I'd raise them." "He never wanted them." Her voice cracked. "He hit Jackson. That was 2 days ago. I took the boys and ran." "Where are they?" "Hiding in the root cellar under the old smokehouse. I told them not to come out until I came back." "I had to find someone who could help." Seth nodded, already stepping back toward his horse. "You came to the right place. You stay here." "No," she said quickly, stepping forward. "I have to go with you." He looked at her, saw the steel under the fear. She was not someone who broke easy. "All right. Mount up." They rode hard across the Turner land, through the dry creek and up toward the old smokehouse tucked into the hill. By the time they dismounted, the sun had dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in streaks of rust and gold. Keira knelt beside the cellar door and knocked twice, then once more. 2 small faces peeked up a moment later, dirt-smeared and wide-eyed. "Boys," she breathed, arms wrapping around them. "This is Seth. He's going to help us." Jackson, tall for his age with his mother's dark eyes, looked between them. "You said we could not trust anyone." "I was wrong," Keira said, brushing his hair back. "We can trust him." Seth crouched beside them. "You too hungry?" Jude nodded fast. "We ate the last biscuit yesterday. Then let us get you home." They rode back slower, Keira riding double with Jude, her arms wrapped tight around him. At the ranch, Seth led them into the bunkhouse empty for the season and lit the stove. He handed out bread and dried apples, poured tin cups of water, and watched as the boys devoured everything without a word. Keira sat on the edge of the cot, her hands folded tight. "I do not know what to do next." Seth met her eyes. "You stay here, for now. I will ride into town tomorrow, speak to the sheriff. If your brother-in-law comes sniffing around, he will have to go through me." Keira shook her head. "He is not the kind to go through law. He is mean. And he is armed. So am I." She looked at him again, more fully this time, like she was seeing the man beneath the badge. "Why are you doing this?" Seth leaned against the doorframe. "Because no one should have to hide behind a barn and whisper for help. And because if I had a sister who made someone promise to protect her sons, I would want that promise kept." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast. "Thank you." He nodded once. "Get some sleep. I will be on the porch." She stood, touched his arm. "I remember you now. You had a colt named Dusty. You let me pet him." Seth smiled, just a little. "That colt grew into the horse I rode out on today." Keira's gaze softened. "You were kind to me then. I remember a girl with wild hair and a laugh that made me stop and listen." Her breath caught. "I never forgot you." Seth stepped back, voice low. Then maybe this is not just about helping. She looked at him for a long moment. Maybe it is not. And when she closed the door behind her, something in Seth's chest felt a little warmer, a little lighter. Outside, the wind had settled. The stars came out one by one, like they were waiting for something too. Dawn peeled slowly across the range, soft and pale, the kind of morning that didn't rush a thing. Seth poured coffee into a battered tin mug and stepped onto the porch outside the bunkhouse. The air was cool enough to bite, and the frost on the split-rail fence shimmered silver in the early light. He sipped, letting the steam rise against his jaw, and listened to the gentle stirrings inside. Keira shifting on the cot, one of the boys murmuring in sleep. A door creaked behind him. Keira stepped out barefoot, wrapping a patched wool blanket around her shoulders. Her hair was braided back now, neater than it had been the night before, though a few strands still clung to her cheek. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him and watched the sun climb. "You always up this early?" she asked finally. "Most days. Livestock doesn't wait." He glanced at her. "You sleep?" "Some." Jude kept twitching in his dreams. He nodded. "I'll ride into town by mid-morning. Sheriff knows me." "He'll listen." "Will he do anything?" she asked, folding her arms tighter. "If there's bruises on the boy and you're the only kin left, there's a case. And if there's not, then we make one." Keira looked out toward the fields where the frost still clung. "I don't want to run again." "You won't have to." She turned her face toward him. "You always this sure of things?" "No, but I know right from wrong." She didn't answer that, but her eyes softened and she leaned a little into the post beside him. Behind them, the boys stirred. Seth handed her the rest of his coffee and stepped down to the yard. He pulled the harness from the rail, tossed it over Dusty's withers, and cinched the strap. Keira came closer, the mug cradled in both hands. "Can I ask something?" "All right." "Why aren't you married?" Seth paused, checked the bridle. "Wasn't the right time." "That's not a reason." "No," he said, swinging into the saddle. "It's the truth." She stepped back as Dusty turned. "You'll be back before dark, earlier if things go smooth. Stay on the ranch. Don't answer the gate unless it's me or Roy." "Who's Roy?" "Old trail cook. Comes by every few days. You'll know him by the limp and the tobacco jaw." Keira gave a faint nod. "Be careful." Seth met her eyes. "Always?" He rode out then, the morning light catching on his shoulders, and didn't look back. Inside the bunkhouse, Keira found Jackson sitting at the table, peeling a hard biscuit with his fingers. "Where'd he go?" the boy asked. "To speak with the sheriff." Jackson didn't look up. "He won't fix it. He might." "He's not like the others," Jackson said, voice low. "He didn't look at us like we were a burden." Keira sat beside him, resting her hand on the edge of the table. "He didn't look at me like I was in the way, either." Jackson's fingers stilled. "Do you trust him?" "I'm trying to." Later, while the boys gathered firewood near the shed, Keira found a washtub behind the main house and hauled water from the pump. She scrubbed out the boys' shirts one at a time until her knuckles ached. The wind cut through her wet sleeves, but she didn't stop. It felt like something she could control. Around midday, a rider approached older man, tall and spare, with a limp that dragged through his left stirrup. He dismounted slow, spat tobacco into the dust, and gave her a nod. "You Keira?" "I am. Name's Roy. Seth said to bring you some stew from the main house. He'd have done it himself, but cook doesn't take kindly to guests in her kitchen." Keira smiled faintly. "Thank you." Roy leaned on the rail. "Seth don't usually take folks in." "I didn't give him much choice." "Maybe not, but he made one anyway." Roy squinted into the distance. "He don't talk about it, but his brother died 5 winters back, left him the ranch, left him quiet too." Keira didn't answer. Roy handed her the pot wrapped in cloth. "He ain't cold, just careful." "I understand." Roy tipped his hat and left her standing with the stew. By the time Seth returned, the shadows were long across the yard and the boys were playing marbles in the dirt. He dismounted slow, dust rising around his boots. Keira stepped off the porch. "Well, Sheriff agreed to send a man out to your old place. Said if what you told me lines up, he'll file to transfer custody." She let out a breath. "What do we do until then? You stay here." "I'll see to it." She studied him, the lines around his mouth, the windburn on his jaw. You didn't have to do all this, I know. But you did. He looked at her then, long and quiet. I remember your laugh, that day in Miles City. I'd forgotten most of the fair, but not that. She blinked once. I didn't think you'd remember. I did. The sun slid behind the hills, and the boys came running up with dirt on their hands and light in their eyes. Keira reached for Jude's collar and wiped his face with her sleeve. Seth watched them for a moment. You all stay in the main house tonight, it's warmer. Keira hesitated. Are you sure? Plenty of room, she nodded slowly. All right. They climbed the steps together, and for the first time in days, Keira didn't look over her shoulder. The kettle hissed gently over the stove in the main house kitchen, its whistle softened by the thick stone walls. Keira stood at the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, slicing turnips with a steady hand. She hadn't cooked in someone else's home in years, but her movements were quiet and sure. The boys were upstairs, asleep in the loft room Seth had cleared for them, and the silence felt like a bomb across her skin. Seth came in through the back door, boots muddy, a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. He took his hat off and set it on the peg near the door, then stepped to the basin to wash his hands. You been busy, she said, glancing at the cleaned fish laid out on the board beside her. Brook trout from the East Stream. Thought it might be a change from dried meat. She nodded once, laying the knife down. I'll coat them in cornmeal. Then, after a moment, you always catch your own supper. Only when I want it to taste right. Keira wiped her hands on her apron. I had to teach myself to cook after my sister passed. Before that, I did the sewing, she handled the meals. What about your folks? Gone by the time I turned 16. We moved east to west, chasing land that never held. She reached for the sack of cornmeal. My sister married young, too young. She thought it'd give her steadiness. Seth leaned against the sideboard. Did it? It gave her sorrow, but she made the best of it. She always did. She dipped the first fish in the meal and set it in the hot pan. She used to sing while she cooked. Loud enough to drown out the shouting. He watched her work, the firelight catching on her cheek. You don't sing. I never had the voice for it, and the boys don't need reminding. The pan sizzled, and for a while neither spoke. The silence was companionable, filled with the scent of browning fish and the faint creak of the beams above. When the meal was done, they sat at the table, plates warm in their hands. Keira ate slowly, chewing with care as if her body still didn't trust the safety of the place. Seth cut into his fish. Sheriff's man stopped by the property. Your brother-in-law was gone, took his wagon and headed east. She looked up sharply. He ran, looks like. Neighbor said he cleared out yesterday morning, took only what he could carry. Seth reached for his bread. Sheriff's filing abandonment of the land, that helps your case. Keira set her fork down. He'll come back. Maybe, but not soon. Sheriff's keeping watch between here and the pass, and I wired the judge in Miles City to expedite the custody papers. Her hands folded in her lap. I never thought anyone would stand up for us like that. You didn't ask for charity. I didn't ask for anything. That's why it matters. Keira looked at him then, long and quiet. You speak like someone who's lost something. Seth didn't look away. I have. But not everything. The room seemed to hold its breath between them. Later, once the dishes were washed and the house had quieted again, Keira stepped out onto the porch. The boards were cool beneath her bare feet, the air crisp with the breath of oncoming frost. Seth was already there, sitting on the rail, his coat draped over one shoulder. She joined him, careful not to disturb the stillness. You didn't ask why I waited behind that barn, she said softly. I figured you'd tell me when it was time. I wasn't sure you'd come around the corner. But I hoped. He didn't turn, just let his voice come low and even. Why me? You looked like someone who didn't need to be asked twice, someone who'd listen before deciding. I remembered that even after everything else faded. Seth nodded. You were right. She glanced toward him, her hand brushing the rail between them. I don't know what comes next. I've never stayed still long enough to think past tomorrow. You don't have to yet. Keira looked toward the barn in the distance where the shadows had settled. It's strange. I feel safer here than I have in years, and I barely know you. You know enough. She let her hand slide until it rested near his, not touching but close. I don't want to leave, she whispered. Even if I had somewhere to go. He turned his palm up just slightly, enough that her fingers could find his if she wanted. Then don't. The silence that followed was full, not empty, a decision made between them without a word more spoken. And when she finally laid her hand in his, their fingers lacing without force, it wasn't a beginning or an end. Just a step forward, sure and steady, into something neither of them needed to name. A hard frost came in the night, crusting the fields in glassy white. Seth rose before first light, boots crunching on the frozen ground as he moved through the barn, checking the mares for signs of colic. He moved quietly, not out of habit but consideration. He knew Keira slept lightly, and the boys even lighter. By mid-morning the sun had softened the ice to dew, and Keira stood behind the house, hanging linens on the line he'd strung for her that morning. Her fingers were red from wringing, her sleeves damp to the elbows. Jackson helped steady the basket while Jude chased a chicken that wasn't in the mood for play. Seth leaned on the porch rail, arms crossed, watching her work. When she caught his eye, she didn't look away. "You've got more hens than I thought," she said, clothespin between her teeth. "They lay better when they're not counted," he replied. She laughed, the sound softer than the one he remembered from years ago, but real. "I was thinking," she said, securing the last sheet, "I could plant a patch of onions and carrots behind the smokehouse. That soil's soft from the runoff. You asking? I wouldn't plant on someone else's land without permission." He stepped down off the porch. "You've got it." She wiped her hands on her skirt. "You sure? You're not someone else?" Keira looked at him a long moment, then turned toward the shed. "I'll need a spade. It's yours." Inside the barn, Jude found an old pail and began collecting stray feathers. "If I get enough," he told Jackson, "we can stuff a pillow." "Or a sling," Jackson muttered, eyeing a broken fence post. "In case he comes back." Seth had been repairing a gate nearby and heard the words. He set the hammer down and crossed to them. "You thinking that way often?" he asked Jackson. The boy didn't flinch. "I don't like being caught off guard," Seth crouched. "You won't be." "But you got something better than a sling now." Jackson nodded, but wariness lingered in his shoulders. That night after supper, Keira stayed beside the hearth after the boys had gone up, mending a tear in Jude's coat by lamplight. Seth sat at the table, sharpening the blade of his skinning knife with slow, even strokes. "You ever think about leaving here?" Keira asked, eyes on her stitching. "I used to when the house was too quiet. And now," he slid the whetstone gently along the steel, "now it's not." She paused. "I keep wondering if it's all right to feel safe so soon." "You didn't choose the storm, you just made it through." Keira tied off her thread. "I want to earn my place here. You already have." She brushed the coat smooth across her knees. "I want to stay." Seth set the knife down. "Then stay." She looked up sharply. "I mean it," he said. "There's land here that could use tending, a family that could fill the rooms again." Her voice was quiet. "I never thought I'd be part of something that didn't want to change me." "You're not here to be changed." She folded the coat, stood, and crossed the room. "You're the first man I've ever trusted to mean what he says." He met her eyes. "Then let me prove it." Keira reached out, her hand resting against his chest. "You already are." Outside, the wind moved through the grass, low and steady. Upstairs, the boys slept soundly for the first time in weeks. And below, in the small kitchen lit by firelight and quiet hope, the beginning of something lasting settled into the walls like warmth. 3 weeks passed under the slow-turning sky of early October. The cottonwoods along the creek dropped their gold into the water, and the mountains beyond the range took on a dusty blue hue, as if winter were already eyeing the land. Seth had finished fencing the western pasture, and Keira had planted her carrots and onions in neat, narrow rows behind the smokehouse. The boys helped where they could, their hands growing steadier each day, their laughter louder. One afternoon, a wagon arrived bearing a court clerk from Miles City. He had been sent to deliver the custody papers in person, weather and distance having slowed the usual postal line. The man, thin and stiff in his wool coat, handed the envelope to Keira on the porch, tipping his hat politely before climbing back onto the bench and riding off without more than a word. Keira stood still for a long time after the dust of the wagon faded. Seth came up the porch steps, brushing hay from his shirt. "You going to open it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she tore the string with careful fingers and unfolded the pages. Her eyes moved across the lines, her lips tightening, then trembling. "They're mine," she whispered. "It's done," Seth's voice was quiet. "Good. I didn't think I'd ever hold something like this." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Proof," he nodded, and she stepped forward and pressed the papers into his hands. "Would you keep them?" "I don't want them lost. I'll lock them in the desk." That night, Jackson asked Seth to show him how to oil a rifle stock. They sat together on the porch, the boy watching every motion, his face intent. Keira stood inside the doorway, Jude leaning against her hip. "Were you ever scared?" Jackson asked, not looking up, plenty of times. "What did you do?" I kept going. The boy nodded, his small hands mimicking Seth's as he wiped down the wood. Later, after the boys had gone to bed, Keira stepped outside with a shawl around her shoulders and a small tin cup of warmed cider in her hands. Seth was splitting kindling near the woodshed, the sound of the axe clean and rhythmic. "I've been thinking," she said as he stacked the last of the wood. "Dangerous business," he replied, wiping his hands. "I want to build a coop," she said. "A proper one, not just a shed with holes patched in. You could. I want the boys to have something that's theirs, eggs they gather, a place they're responsible for. I think it'd help. I'll cut the timber tomorrow." She looked at him closely. "You never ask what I need, you just see to it." "I listen." She stepped closer. "No one ever did that before, you deserve it." He glanced toward the house. "They all do. I've never known a man like you. I've never known a woman I wanted beside me at dawn every day." Her breath caught. "You mean that?" Seth reached for her hand, rough palm closing gently around hers. "I do. I want you here, not just for the planting, for the long winters. For everything." Her voice dropped. "I was afraid to believe it. You don't have to be any more." Keira leaned into him then, her head against his chest, and he wrapped both arms around her. No words passed between them after that, just the quiet of belonging settling into their bones. They married under the bare branches of the cottonwood trees behind the house before the first snow. Roy stood as witness, and the boys wore clean shirts and black ties that didn't quite sit straight. The preacher from down near Dry Creek read the vows simple and slow, and when Seth spoke his, he looked only at her, never blinking, as if nothing else in the world could matter. They built the coop together by hand, and in spring the hens laid well. Jackson raised a runt chick into a proud little rooster, and Jude carved his name into the doorframe of the bunkhouse with a borrowed knife. Keira planted rows of beans and squash, her hands in the soil each morning before the sun crested the ridge. Seth built a bench beneath the window for her, and each evening they sat there as the sky turned to amber and blood, speaking softly of the day. Sometimes she would lay her head on his shoulder while he read aloud from the old books his brother had left behind. And sometimes they sat in silence, the kind that needed no filling. By the second harvest, they'd added a milk cow and a second garden bed. The boys ran through the fields with their boots half-laced and their laughter wild. The house had grown warmer not from the hearth alone, but from the way it had filled with lives stitched together by everything they had endured and chosen. And in the still moments when the wind quieted and the fields hushed, Keira would look out across the land and feel something she had never dared claim before: home. Hers, theirs forever.